Welcome, everyone, to a really fascinating deep dive today. We're plunging into some pretty profound questions.
Yeah, things like free will, choice, destiny, the big ones.
Exactly. And we're using some, ancient narratives as our case studies, specifically figures like Helel.
Right, the powerful angelic being often linked to the origins of evil.
And Adam, of course. His story is so foundational for thinking about human choice, isn't it?
Absolutely fundamental.
So our mission really is to unpack this stack of sources we've got. They tackle whether these huge falls from grace were, inevitable.
Or if they boil down to individual choices made at critical moments.
So get ready for some honestly surprising angles and different perspectives on these dilemmas that people have wrestled with for ages.
It's pretty amazing how these old stories still give us frameworks for thinking about responsibility in human nature today.
Okay, let's get into it, starting with Helel. Our sources really split here. Viewpoint A says Helel absolutely could have chosen not to fall. There's this example in Genesis, Abimelech in chapter 20. God actually stops him from sinning.
Right, because Abimelech didn't intend to do wrong. His heart was, in a sense, innocent in that specific act.
So what does that incident suggest about divine grace? Is it just there?
Well, this view says it's active, not passive. See, creatures can't, perfectly keep commandments just by their own power.
Okay.
But with God's grace, they absolutely can. If they don't push it away, if they don't reject that help.
So Helel, he had access to that grace.
According to this perspective, yes. If he'd accepted it, cooperated with it, he wouldn't have sinned. It was a conscious turning away.
But then why didn't he? I mean, you have figures like Michael and Gabriel who didn't fall. Was that same grace available to them?
Precisely. The implication is, yes, they faced tests too, but they chose differently. They embraced the grace offered.
So Helel's resistance was the key factor.
That's what this view emphasizes. God grants real free will, allows only temptations that can be overcome with grace. So Helel chose sin.
Which makes the judgment fair, because he could have done otherwise with help.
Exactly. And here's a really interesting thought tied to this. Some sources suggest if Helel hadn't fallen, God might have had another pre-planned way, maybe one not involving the cross, to bring free will to its perfection in creation.
Wow. So his choice wasn't just personal. It had these huge cosmic ripple effects.
Immense implications.
Okay, but then let's look at viewpoint B for Helel. The idea that his fall was, basically inevitable, destined.
Right. This perspective starts from the idea that creatures, by their very nature, inherently lack the power to keep divine commandments perfectly on their own steam.
Sort of a built-in limitation?
Kind of.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then Helel's fall wasn't so much a rejection of grace, but an outcome of that inherent limitation.
But that raises a really difficult question, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Did God then command Helel to obey a law he was fundamentally incapable of keeping? That changes the whole dynamic of command and responsibility.
That's a heavy theological point. Okay, let's shift this framework down to Eden. Apply these same questions to Adam. Was his failure inevitable?
Same split, essentially. Viewpoint A again says no, Adam could have overcome the temptation.
Because God only commands what's possible and always provides grace for tests.
That's the core principle, yes. Always grace sufficient for the test at hand. And if Adam had resisted Helel...
Or the serpent, as the story goes.
Right, the tempter. If he'd resisted, his free will could potentially have been perfected right then and there, without the need for suffering and redemption later on.
Kind of like the angels who resisted their tests.
Exactly like them, potentially. So this view strongly holds that even though God, in his foreknowledge, knew Adam would fall,
he still gave him the genuine ability to choose otherwise.
Yes, making the expulsion from Eden a direct result of Adam's own personal responsible choice.
Okay. But then viewpoint B counters that Adam was, in fact, inevitably going to fail.
And the reasoning here is often tied to Adam's state before the act. Lacking, say, the full indwelling of the Holy Spirit, or what some call knowledge of the cross's love, that deep understanding of God's ultimate sacrifice and redemptive plan.
He just wasn't equipped.
He wasn't equipped to stand against such a powerful, cunning tempter like Helel, or the serpent embodying that spirit. He was spiritually immature, perhaps.
There's also that interpretation of naked, right? Not just physical.
Exactly. Some sources dig into that, suggesting naked implied he already carried a kind of shame, an innate imperfection, or was even spiritually dead in some sense before eating the fruit.
Already fallen, in a way.
In a way, yes. Which implies his failure was almost predetermined by his initial state.
So why allow the temptation then, in this view?
The idea here is that God allowed it to make Adam realize his state. to see his own deadness or inadequacy, and from that low point, turn back towards God, recognizing his need.
Wow. Okay, so that forces some really critical questions, like, can a creature really have meaningful free will if they lack that profound understanding of God's full love, or if they're dead to begin with?
Precisely. And if that state was somehow innate, where does the responsibility lie? Is it Adam's fault or part of the created order?
These different takes really highlight that deep ongoing tension, don't they, between like a divine blueprint and actual individual responsibility.
They absolutely do. And understanding these perspectives isn't necessarily about picking one right answer. It's about appreciating the sheer complexity of these ideas.
Yeah, seeing how different traditions have grappled with human capacity, divine grace, and how they interact.
It gives profound insight into these questions that we still ask today.
Definitely. So maybe a provocative thought to leave you all with. How do these different ways of looking at Helel and Adam impact your understanding of free will in your own life? When you face challenges, what does it mean to overcome them? How much is divine help or grace? And how much is your own choice, your own effort? Where's the balance? Something to think about.